Welcome everyone to session number 20.
20?
That's crazy.
That is crazy.
Whose idea was this?
It's a joint effort.
Yes,
joint craziness.
We have something different in store for you today, and I'll let Mr. Terry Hunt take it away.
All right. We were planning to go back to the regular series of letters, numbered. We would have been on number 31, I believe. But I realized that in the very back of the appendix for the chronological edition of the Mahatma letters, there is a series of questions and answers that was kind of apart from the regular letter series. Now, we will have one letter, number 44, which again addresses these questions and adds more information to the information that was received as a result of these questions. But I think it's important to introduce them at this point where approximately they were received. Now, these aren't dated as a specific date because it was kind of an ongoing back and forth, and we don't know how long it lasted. Apparently, it began when Sinnett and Hume, and I believe this was back in the time when all three of them were together at Shimla, and they were asking her for some more information about the cosmology that KH had started to give them.
The three of them meaning HPB as well as the two?
Actually, yeah, I'm not certain of that, but at any rate, the two of them were asking questions to HPB. She was giving them replies under inspiration, whether I believe it was from Moria. So these were actually replies that came from Moria. At first, they were written down in her handwriting, but I believe that as it continued back and forth, that some of these were written by Moria as a form of just communications back and forth. So these are listed as cosmological notes from Mahatma M. And in going over these, I'm going to have you read the questions as they were written by Sinnett and Hume, and then I will read the replies that came from Mahatma Moria.
All right. What are the different kinds of knowledge?
The real, which we call Gyu, and the unreal, Gyu-mi.
What language is that?
That's Tibetan.
Okay.
Now, he's going to use a lot of Tibetan terms here because that's the cosmology that he knows. As a Tibetan Buddhist, well, he's not Tibetan, but a Lama in the monasteries in Tibet. So he knows Tibetan, and that's the terminology that they use at the monasteries where he and KH teach. And so two types of knowledge, the real and the unreal. The Gyu, the real, becomes Fohat when it is acting, an active agent of will, electricity. There's no other name for it. So he's trying to use terms in English for these Tibetan terms that most of their monks and lamas understand because they discuss this constantly.
Now, this is going to be completely abstract for most of our listeners. So the term Fohat is, I haven't heard that term anywhere except for in the Theosophical tradition, but clearly it comes from some Tibetan tradition as well.
Buddhism, yes.
Buddhism. I'll make a very plebeian attempt to put it into other words, it's the substratum for manifestation in the universe.
That's pretty close.
Sort
Pretty
of.
good. Very, very good. And this is what he's trying to explain. He's pointing out that there are two types of knowledge. There's human knowledge from the greatest intellects in the world, and then there is adept knowledge. And by that he means the knowledge of the universe. We're going to try to simplify this greatly because seriously, there is no reason for most people to focus very heavily on this. The best thing you can do is just get a general concept of these things and not obsess too much about it.
Most of this deeper knowledge is interesting and it gives us more insight, but it's less practical, and that's why we don't want to emphasize and belabor it too much. But it is part of the teaching, so we'll bring it out. And it's good that we have both of us sharing slightly different perspectives on these things, so we can shed more light from different angles. Do you think it might be appropriate to use similar? We have the term Maya, which means illusion or things in the
that'll
physical.
come in here.
Maya, okay, and then Satya, which could be considered unveiled truth. Just other terms that might help understanding.
And this will absolutely become practical in the far distant future. When we are working actively with Mahatmas and learning how to become creators ourselves, absolutely it will be essential. You will have to know this. But right now, we have one goal only: purification. And those students who say, oh no, I've got all that down, I'm ready for the heavy stuff, you're fooling yourself. So that's up to you. You can waste all the time you want on trying to put this into your physical brain, but it's going to be a wasted effort.
Okay, next question. What is the difference between the two kinds of knowledge?
Real knowledge deals with eternal verities and primeval causes. The unreal deals only with illusory effects, Maya. You stands independent of the belief or unbelief of man. Gyu-mi, the unreal, requires faith. It rests on authority, human authority.
Wow. Number 3, who possesses the real knowledge?
The las, or adept, alone possesses the real knowledge, his mind being en rapport with the universal mind. Universal mind, we've heard that term before. And then he says the las has made the perfect connection of his soul with the universal mind in its fullness, which makes him, for that time, a divine being existing in the region of absolute intelligence, knowledge of natural laws, or Gyu, real knowledge.
This is a place where I can add other terms to help clarify. When we talk about basic yoga philosophy in the Yoga Sutras, yoga meaning translated to union, and what is being unified. Two different things, actually, and this is, in my opinion, more of a layman's term, a layman's explanation of this. When we work to first unify our lower nature to our higher nature, that's yoga or union. We're unifying our thinking brain, our lower mind, concrete mind, the lower manas, if you will, with our higher mind, which is the causal body, and you could refer to that as Atma, spirit, in a way. There's some other delineations, but then there's a second union that goes on. Once a human being learns how to connect our lower selves with our true self, we can connect our true self to the all self, or the cosmic mind. So connecting our Atma to Param Atma, which is another word for the Gyu,
and the absolute.
The absolute.
Right.
So when we practice union or yoga, it's two separate things that are being unified: lower nature to higher, and then our higher nature to the all self, which is described by Patanjali.
Right. And at this point, because of what he's talking about, we can go back to a previous letter, letter number 17, the only one that Sinnett received while he was on vacation in London. And that was in March of 1881. And this is, of course, from K.H., because that's who they were corresponding with at the time. And in that, K.H. says, talking about the trials and tribulations that one has to go through to become an adept, he says, believe me, there comes a moment in the life of an adept when the hardships he has passed through are 1,000-fold rewarded. In order to acquire further knowledge, he has no more to go through a minute and slow process of investigation and comparison of various objects, but is accorded an instantaneous, implicit insight into every first truth. Having passed that stage of philosophy which maintains that all fundamental truths have sprung from a blind impulse and left far behind him that other class of thinkers, the intellectuals or skeptics, who hold that fundamental truths are derived from the intellect alone, the adept sees and feels and lives in the very source of all fundamental truths, the universal spiritual essence of nature. So that's exactly what he's talking about, that the adepts are the only ones, except those who are obviously higher than they are, who have access to this real knowledge as compared to what we ordinary mortals call knowledge.
That brings up an interesting point, though. If regular people are able to reach samadhi in meditation and merge, I would imagine that we have similar access, but it's not permanent. It's just during that moment of samadhi.
And it's gradual. It's not like instantaneous that you have all knowledge.
Okay.
It's like you do get flashes of inspiration during meditation. And that's the beginning of this. What you want to do is make that accessible at any time you choose to. For most of us, you get a little flash here and there, and you try to recreate it the next time you meditate, and it may not happen. But at some point, if you keep working and working, you can make that happen at any time you want it to.
I wish he would say that, though, because he says the adept alone possesses it. But I believe that we can all access that state. Of course, we don't live in that state like they do.
And that's the difference, is whether it's a temporary little glimpse of it,
Sure.
or you are able to access it on demand, whatever you want.
Tell me again the connection between that letter. That's just more information on this response.
No, the two are not connected
Right.
except by the material.
Okay.
So they already had KH's view, and now they're getting Morya's view on the very same thing.
And we're making the connection based on the content just to add
Right.
insight. Okay. Question 4. Is there any difference between what produces primeval causes and their ultimate effects?
None. Everything in the occult universe, which embraces all the primeval causes, is based upon two principles. One, cosmic energy, or Fohat, and two, cosmic ideation, the cosmic mind.
And pause for 1 sec. That's the relationship of matter and energy, or Shiva and Shakti. Is that what he's referring to? Energy, and ideation means consciousness?
Yes. But when we're referring to it in the terms of the absolute, it is potential. And that's what we have to keep in mind.
It's not manifest yet, so it's non-dual.
It's not yet active. It's not operative, but it exists there in potentiality. So he's talking about Fohat, cosmic energy, and cosmic ideation. He says Tian Kam, or the knowledge of bringing about, giving the impulse to cosmic energy in the right direction. In Fohat, all that exists on earth as ultimates exists as primeval. Now, primeval basically means the essence of what was there before anything existed. The very fundamental beginnings of a manifested universe. So as we will see, there are periods of manifestation called manvantaras, and there are periods of complete repose called pralayas. And whenever there's a new burst of energy coming out of a pralaya, this is what he's talking about as primeval, that potency, that potential that exists, and the second that it begins to wake up, all manifestation starts forming itself.
Sounds like a Big Bang.
It is. It's exactly what it is.
What is the one eternal thing in the universe independent of every other thing?
Space. Pretty big concept, isn't it? And that's one word response. That's all he said.
Thank you, Master Moria. Thank you.
He's a man of few words. Sometimes.
Sometimes, right. Question 6. What things are coexistent with space?
1, duration.
That would be time, right? The concept of linear.
Sort of, because you can't really call it time because there's no measurement of it. So the sense
Duration.
of time. So duration. Number 2, matter. So matter is always present. It never disappears. 3, motion, because motion is the imperishable life of matter. You can't have matter without there being motion. If motion ceased, there would be no matter. So even during the pralayas, or night of the mind, there is motion. Number 4, the akasha, or cosmic atmosphere, which, latent or active, surrounds and interpenetrates all matter in motion, of which it is at once a result and the medium by which the cosmic energy acts on its source. And 5th, the Purusha, or 7th principle of the universe. Linga Shariram, and now he's talking about the astral body of the human being, is composed of the ethereal elements of the body's organism. It never leaves the body except at death, and then it remains near. Only at death does it actually break, and there is no connection between the other components and the physical body that it has just left.
A couple things. First of all, each one of these topics could be a month-long course.
Right, of course.
Each one of these things. Secondly, I wonder why he's mentioning specifically the astral body and what things are coexistent with space. What about the pranic body? What about the manomaya kosha, the mental body? I wonder why he's choosing to talk about the astral body only as coexisting with space. Very odd.
We sometimes don't know all of the things that go on in between these questions, because we don't know which questions were asked in which sessions.
Sure.
So there are little things like that that come in and are like, where did that come from?
Sure, that
and
seems random.
we don't know all of the conversations that they had with HPB in the meantime, for example. But he's building up to presenting two charts,
Okay.
the Constitution of Man and the Constitution of the Universe. And he's kind of introducing some of these elements so that it will begin to make some sense.
The second to the last one, the Purusha, that's going to be key coming up, I'm sure. So
Oh, yes.
Can't wait to get to that part. Question 7. Are we to understand Purusha as another name for space or as a different thing occupying every part of space?
It's the same. Swayambhu, which is the potential for self-creation, occupies every part of space, which is boundless and eternal, hence must be space in one sense. Swayambhu becomes Purusha when it comes into contact with matter, okay?
Yeah. Even in Taimni's explanations of the Yoga Sutras, he talks about all the Purushas moving through the cycle of incarnation. So,
They talk about Prakriti and Purusha.
right.
The higher element and the manifested variety of that.
Prakriti would be the manifestation of Purusha, kind of like the physical.
Yes, you're absolutely right. That is, it is. I see now that that's exactly what he's saying.
Let's see how he explained it. I'm very curious. Question 8. Is the universal mind the aggregate of all the minds of the Dhyan Chohans or planetaries, the result of the actions of Purusha on matter, just as the spiritual soul in man is the action of spirit on matter?
Yes.
Wow. Well, at least these dudes are understanding the concepts. They're asking something and they were right.
Apparently, yes. They get some of these right.
This is so interesting. Let's pause for just a quick second. Is the universal mind the aggregate of all the minds? Now, if we put a period there, I thought that was the case. All the minds, meaning all 80 billion?
60 billion.
60 billion souls. I would have thought that the universal mind is the aggregate of 60 billion minds, but that's not what he's saying here.
No,
The
because
Dhyan-
and because those 60 billion know the unreal truth, the unreal knowledge. The only ones who know real knowledge are the adepts, and more specifically the Dhyan Chohans, which is the same as planetary spirits. The highest beings in our solar system, and specifically in our planetary system.
I wish we could ask them some questions, because this is a foundational concept of why we are alive on Earth in the first place. And the answer is to gain experience, to learn and grow. Well, doesn't our experience all translate back into I thought was the universal mind after a little bit after each lifetime, but a lot of it after our soul is finished with the whole cycle? Which I guess that then we would be a very highly advanced being at that point.
But you can
anyway.
also say that the adepts on up to and including the planetary spirits, the Dhyan Chohans, have absorbed all of that other knowledge. They have that as well. So it could
makes
be
it the same.
seen that same way.
Ah, okay. Question 9. Are we to look upon the 7 principles as all matter and all spirit, one thing, with spirit as it were at one pole and matter at the other?
Yes, exactly so.
And for our viewers, we'll see what the 7 principles are in just a moment on a chart, similar to the Koshic the koshas, but it's presented slightly differently.
But as you remember, in our own book, on one of the first charts, we show the gradation between pure spirit and the manifested universe, the lowest part of manifestation.
And even though there are delineations, there are 7 principles, they interpenetrate, and we have this gradation because there isn't an exact delineation between each one. The planes of existence are, as he says here, one thing with spirit at one pole and matter at the other.
And you can call everything spirit or everything matter. It doesn't matter which term you use. It's one something. And then only during manifestation does it differentiate. During the pralaya, there is no differentiation. It's just
It's all the same.
something.
And we can even say like physical things seem matter only, but inside atoms there is space.
Oh,
There's
it's,
more
it's
space.
almost entirely space.
It is, and they're moving. There's motion, even though it doesn't seem like that's moving right there. The electrons are moving, right?
Yeah,
it's fascinating.
If we look at it with yogic sight,
Mm-hmm.
with their microscopes, all you're seeing is motion and energy. There's no matter. Matter essentially doesn't exist.
It's the same thing.
It's an illusion. It's absolutely an illusion. We can knock on something only because the energies are banging against
Right.
each other.
Each other's energies. I love how he says yes. Okay, question 9. Oh no, question 10. So are we to view them, meaning the 7 principles, as different states of matter or spirit, or how?
States, conditions, call it whatever you want. I call it Kien, cause, because it is itself, being itself a result of a previous or some primary cause.
That's a little bit confusing answer, but states, conditions.
He's talking about something that causes something else. And this something in the beginning is potential, and with the right impulse and the energy, we get creation.
It's the will to do something, the will to
Right.
manifest, to experience.
Right.
I remember a quote from HPB. We may get to it at some point where she says, "That's how does she respond?" Someone says, "Why? Why does the divine mind want to manifest?" And she says something like, "No one knows. That's the one question we don't know," or something like that. It's to experience, to have an experience.
So here's what we can say. Everything in the universe has desire. You can call it desire, will, this need to exist and to express, to move, to do something.
And that's what causes the Big Bang.
Yeah.
Manifestation.
Doesn't matter whether it's a galaxy or whether it is a planet or whether it's a bug in the forest. Everything has desire.
Question 11. All matter consists of ultimate molecules. How may we conceive the different states of matter?
As the molecules go on rarefying, so in proportion, they become attenuated. Now this takes a little bit of imagination. So when it's in pure spiritual form, it's almost like, I guess, the result of a black hole. Everything is completely compacted to where there's no differentiation whatsoever. It's there, but when you think that everything is energy, it's like this extreme powerful energy. And then as it begins manifestation, the first thing that happens is polarity, and all of a sudden things begin to differentiate.
Also known as duality.
And then they separate, and then everything becomes more and more dense as it continues to expand. And at some point, he's going to describe, there comes equilibrium, and then it's almost like it switches polarity. All of a sudden, it's kind of like the prodigal son story. At some point, the prodigal son gets so far away from his spiritual nature that he's like, ooh, I'm getting a little scared now. I think I might need to start heading home again. And that's exactly what happens. At some point, we've had enough of this, and we're like, okay, let's get back to our real home. And we start heading that direction.
So attenuated, and then he continues his answer.
All right, so as the molecules go on rarefying, so in proportion they become attenuated. And the greater the distance between our globe and them, I do not mean here the region within the reach of your science, the greater the change in their polarity, the negative pole acquiring a stronger property of repulsion, and the positive losing gradually its power of attraction. And now is the time for your men of knowledge to write me down as a Tibetan ass and for me to return the compliment. So he doesn't lose his sense of humor. He's saying, your men of science will think that I'm a madman, and I'll return the compliment. Now is where we get our charts. He's introducing this concept of spirit, pure spirit, going out into manifestation. So he provided two charts, and I have put them side by side so that they're a little easier to compare one to the other. With the constitution of man on one side and the equivalent constitution of the universe on the other. As above, so below. And since we don't have access to cosmic understanding of how these different principles work, we can at least get a general idea of the human part. We can start where we know something, and then we can proceed from there. I will say for our viewers that although this is really dense and complicated, if you want to just skip to the end of the video, we will, in the chapters, mark the point where we will give a synopsis so that if you get bogged down at any point, just skip to the end and we'll give you a Reader's Digest version of everything just condensed down. Now this already, what we're presenting, is very much a Reader's Digest version. What he is giving them here is, in essence, the entire secret doctrine. 750 pages approximately of information about exactly this. This was the very first outline of what was going to be in the secret doctrine.
The book, HPB's second book.
And yes, her magnum opus. They were hoping at the time that Sinnett and Hume were going to be the ones to write all of this down in the form of a book. And so that's why they were spending the time, Moria at this point, spending the time, and by the way, KH is still in his 30-day retreat. Apparently having the same experience as numerous bodhisattvas before him. And that is why Moria is spending this time. Remember at the beginning of their communications, he was not sure at all that he even wanted to communicate with these two guys. But over the course of a few weeks, he warmed up considerably. And now he's getting excited. He's like, well, these guys may actually have something. We may be, I'm even thinking maybe I want to work with these guys.
We need to entice him again and have him come work with us.
Yeah, hopefully somebody will. That would be very nice. So he's giving them this chart, the two charts, and comparing them. So now we're going to get a little bit of information. When you view the video, we will have the chart up at various times so that you can look at it. We'll be pointing out specific things.
How was the chart transmitted to them? Was it on paper? Was it a mental image?
It was written down, obviously, very similar to this,
So it might have
except
been
they were in two different charts.
HPB must have written it out.
So either she did or Moria wrote it or had one of his chelas write it, and then it was mailed to them.
in a letter. Okay.
We don't have all the details on how every part of this got to them. We only have the final version of it. All right, so now we're on question number 13.
It's not necessary to go over the chart right now.
What we can say, we can go over a little bit of it, is that obviously the physical body of humans is sum total of all physical manifestation in physical form of the universe. And that each has a life principle, something that makes it alive. In our case, it's what they call prana or jivatma for the human being. And for the universe, the equivalent would be simply called Purusha or universal spirit. So in their terminology, at least at this point, they're calling that Purusha, is the vivifying aspect of the universe. Now, these terms did change over time. So these are the very first terms that they were using, and they just had to kind of come up with English words on their own. And over time, some of these concepts and many of the terms have changed. So don't get hung up on these. These are not permanent. We have an astral body, our vehicle for expressing emotion. In the universe, that's called Akasha. That would be the equivalent to our astral body.
For a much more modern version of this, as Terry mentioned, we have a chart in our book on page 33, if I'm not mistaken.
I think it is. Yeah. Now, above that, things get a little stranger. They call what we would call the fourth principle now, the lower mind, they call Kamarupa, which has to do with the desire form. And we would associate that more with the astral body today. So they're still struggling, trying to come up with the proper concepts of how to explain each one. The fifth principle for the human, they call the animal soul. Now that sounds very strange for a human, doesn't it? To call what we would call our soul the animal soul. But that's the term they came up with. And then they called the sixth, which is we would call Buddhi, the spiritual soul. And then the seventh, which we would call, I guess, Atma, and beyond that, Paramatma, they just call it spirit.
Mahatma, the great spirit.
Now, one term that they were using, and we see it a lot in the secret doctrine, is the equivalent for the highest spirit in the universe. They call Ein Sof, which is a Kabbalistic term. And here they just call it latent spirit, or in other words, the potential existent, the highest potential in the universe. In Sanskrit, they call it Svayambhu. Svayambhu. All right. So before people get too bogged down in this, let's go ahead with the questions.
Okay, question 13. Semcham, animated universe.
And then how you pronounce that, I have no idea. It just says S.SA.
Earth as an element. Where then does cosmic or unorganized matter fit in?
Cosmic matter, space, duration, and motion all are one. Fire, as everything else, has 7 principles.
Question 14. So all matter, cosmic or organized, has inherent motion. What then does jihna, 2, vital soul or the vivifying principle, do to it?
Now here he's talking about the second principle of the universe, which they called Purusha, and which corresponds in the human form with prana or jivatma. And here's the response. There, you see? You might as well ask what the vital principle, prana or jivatma, does for the human body when it comes into it together with the other 5 principles.
Let's pause for a second. I think people can grasp that. Our physical body, or sometimes we joke around and call it an earth suit,
Yeah.
or a meat suit, but that's a little bit more tourist. Imagine if there was no prana. We would be a dead body.
Yeah, exactly.
So prana is the life force that animates this physical body. Prana is sort of physical, but sort of super physical, because science does recognize that something is making this body alive. The heart beats, the brain and the neurons fire. So something is making that happen. It's prana. So that's how we can relate to that. And then taking that concept and macrocosmifying it, which isn't the real word, but to the universal scheme here, Purusha, the question is, what does Jinha do to all matter in the universe? And Jinha, or Purusha, is the vivifying force to the universe, just like prana is the vivifying force to the body.
So you've got exactly the right concept. We take what we can grasp and then we apply it to a larger principle. Everything is a cycle within a cycle.
Yes.
It never changes.
Yes.
So if you can fully grasp one of them, you can interject that into a higher level and at least get a vague comprehension of it. So he says, a dead body is composed of molecules full of life, is it not? Every one of those molecules has motion, has action. Every single molecule is full of life.
Even if the body is dead, the atoms are still moving.
They're still atoms.
There's still motion, yes.
Yet, when the vital principle has deserted the whole, what is it but a dead body? Give up your pansophy. Now there's a new word.
Pansophy.
Yeah.
So Sophie.
Yeah,
is this-
Sophie,
we know
knowledge, wisdom, and all. Now,
Pan means, yeah.
now he explains what it means. It's the all-powerful God theory. So it's kind of a jab at the Christian concept of this
Omnipotence.
yes, all-powerful God who is inscrutable. We can't quite figure him out, but he is all-powerful, all-knowing,
Everywhere.
omnipotent, omnipresent, and he created the universe. Well, who created him? Well, we're not sure. It's a mystery. There are lots of mysteries when it comes to this all-powerful God theory, because in truth, the fact is, it doesn't make sense. And so we resort to saying, well, it's a mystery. It's beyond our comprehension. And he's saying, well, there are actually beings on earth that can comprehend the truth, but it is not what you think it is. There is no all-powerful God. So he says, give up your pansophy, your all-powerful God theory, and come down to our gyu, real knowledge. This is actual knowledge of the way things are. Then he continues, we believe in spontaneous generation and you do not. Now he's not talking about Christianity, he's talking about scientists. So he's saying that the religion is incorrect in saying that there's some all-powerful God that created everything, made up all the rules. Come down to our level of thinking and our realization that there is actually real knowledge. We believe in spontaneous generation, and you do not. Now, there was a time when scientists were at least entertaining the theory that there was spontaneous generation, that all of a sudden the collection of molecules that weren't alive at some point all of a sudden did become alive. They were trying to explain the origins of life, and science has given up on the idea of spontaneous generation, but they still have to admit they have no idea where life actually comes from. How do you take a bunch of molecules that are inert and all of a sudden they become an organic organism?
So one theory of how life generated on Earth is that, though, is spontaneous generation.
And they hedge about that.
Mm-hmm.
A confluence of almost impossible circumstances.
Concourse.
Yes, exactly.
But why is it? Oh, sorry.
They absolutely do not know, and they are loath to admit that because they don't like admitting that they don't know. But
why is Moria saying that the masters believe in that? Because it's not what they believe.
Well, what they believe is that it is a pattern that it has always existed,
right.
where. And anything that has latent memory is going to act again. So none of these creatures that we have on Earth today have never existed before. Mm-hmm. They've always existed in some form on other planets, in other galaxies, and they haven't lost that ability to do that. So whether you call it spontaneous generation or something else.
And it's ancient, old language and all that.
Yeah, exactly. And then he says,
we say that Jima, Purusha, being positive, and Jigyu, cosmic matter, the earth in this case being negative, it is only when the two come in contact as the former is brought to act upon the latter that organized living, self-acting matter is produced. So you combine those two, and all of a sudden you have something that is alive. That the Purusha, which is the soul or the cosmic prana acting upon the cosmic matter, and then there's life.
Right. Everything that is invisible, imponderable, the spirit of a thing is positive. So the spiritual part of something is the positive, for it belongs to the world of reality. That is what's real. Mm-hmm. Whereas everything solid, visible, is negative. Primeval and ultimate, positive and negative, there is so much in our manifested world. As the forces move on and the distance between organized and unorganized matter becomes greater, now organized matter means in physical form and organized in potential form, as it becomes greater, a tendency towards the reverse begins to take place, just what I mentioned before.
The inward movement or the dissolution movement.
Exactly. The powers of attraction and repulsion become gradually weaker. Then a complete exchange of properties takes place, and for a time, equilibrium is restored in an opposite order. At every grade further on or away toward their primary chaotic state, its property shifts no more mutually but weakens gradually until it reaches the world of non-being, where the eternal mechanical motion exists, the uncreated cause from which proceeds in a kind of incessant downward and upward motion, this cycle of manifestation going back to unmanifested. And it just continues in a cycle. During the pralaya, that upward and downward motion ceases. Inherent unconscious life alone remains. All creative forces are paralyzed, and everything is resting during the night of mind. So those 5 things that he mentioned, space being part of space, the motion, the matter, the duration, the energy, all of that still exists, but it is in potentiality. It has contracted down to nothing but the potential of being something.
We can have a 3-year course on that.
Oh, you can spend 4 lifetimes studying nothing but that, but this is about as concrete as you can make it.
Question 15. Are we to consider any of the principles as non-molecular?
There comes a time when polarity ceases to exist or act, as does everything else. In the night of mind, the pralaya, all is equalized in the boundless cosmos in a state of non-action or non-being.
Question 16. So is cosmic matter non-molecular?
Cosmic matter can be no more non-molecular than organized matter. The 7th principle, latent spirit, in the universal model, the highest, or Ein Sof, is molecular as well as the 1st principle, unorganized matter. Organized matter.
Since it's in the physical.
As well as the 1st principle, organized matter. But the former differentiates from the latter not only by its molecules getting wider apart and becoming more attenuated, but also by losing its polarity. Try to understand and realize this idea, and the rest becomes easy. Easy for him to say.
Try to understand. As we move more towards pure spirit at the top, polarity starts to drop away because we are approaching non-duality.
Exactly.
Yikes.
Yeah. All merges back into one. The dewdrop
slips into the shining sea. And that's why at the top of the gradation on our chart, it's just almost, it's white at the very top.
So
no
they
polarity.
point out again and again, don't make yourself crazy trying to understand this, because only an adept can understand this. And even their pupils, the initiates, their pupils who are quite advanced, they're still on their way to getting to that point. They're still working on it. But they have a much better idea than I do, that's for sure.
The type of timescales we're talking about are so incomprehensible as well. This is the lifetime of a universe, basically, we're talking about. The lifetime of a manifested universe, trillions of years.
Yes, exactly. And we can only compare that to a physical phenomenon, such as the cycle of a physical sun.
Yeah.
But when you get on these higher levels, it would be absolutely incomprehensible and meaningless.
Question 17. Tell us about the hypothetical absolute and infinite final cause. Where's he even getting those terms from? Infinite final cause.
I'm not sure where that came from. They must have had it introduced in one of their other conversations, because I don't remember it being in the Mahatma letters. So Moria says, the absolute and infinite is composed of the conditioned and the finite. Causes are conditioned in their modes of existence and attributes, and as individual aggregates, unconditioned and eternal in their sum, or as a collective aggregation. Now, I understand absolutely nothing out of that. So,
Isn't it interesting, though? Hume or Sinnett is saying, tell us about the absolute.
Yeah, exactly.
Tell us about the infinite mind.
Yeah,
and then here's the answer.
Yeah, it would be like a centipede at the base of a nuclear
Right.
power plant saying, explain to me how this works.
Yeah. And then if it was KH replying, we would have 16 pages, though. But since it's Moria, we have
exactly.
we have one paragraph. Okay.
Let's see, where are we?
Question 18.
Okay.
If the absolute is a blind law, how can it give birth to intelligence?
It can't, as passive latent intelligence, which in its pure immateriality is non-intelligence and non-consciousness. But as soon as it becomes imprisoned in matter, it is transformed into both.
That is a hugely telling statement.
Exactly.
The unmanifest is not intelligent. It's
right.
It's not really alive per se.
Right.
But when it's like forced into an outer dimension, so to speak, then somehow it becomes conscious. Kind of like a baby coming out of the birth canal. I don't know. Is that somewhat accurate?
There is no external force that is making it happen. It's all
will.
within.
Some
and
kind of will.
It's this natural instinct or impulse to, okay, it's time to wake up and let's manifest something again.
On a much smaller scale, since we're always talking about cycles and fractals and things, think about the gazelle on the savannah. They don't really think about standing up and running immediately when they're born, but they just do it because they have to. And the universe just kind of has to manifest sometimes.
There you go.
Dissolve sometimes. Question 19. So the absolute, if intelligent, it's not though. So the absolute.
Well, yeah, go ahead.
So the absolute, if intelligent, must be omnipotent, omniscient, and all good.
Please give your reasons why. Obviously, he doesn't go along with that.
Right.
So now he's going to.
Okay. So he said. So then Hume or Sinnett, we don't know which one, right? Says in the East, the absolute itself, non-conscious, is linked. Wait, is this Sinnett or?
Well, it's one of them.
Okay, we don't. In the East, the absolute itself, non-conscious, is linked to intelligence by emanations, supposed to be conditioned. The emanations are the monads or the individual spirits, right?
I assume, but now he's quoting something, and I don't know what it is that he's quoting, but some kind of understanding in the East that is available.
Okay. The quote is, how far this hypothesis satisfies the mind as to the possibility of intelligence evolving out of non-intelligence, end quote, depends on the mind addressed. That actually makes sense, though. The unmanifest becomes conscious when an individual monad or spirit manifests into a body. That makes sense to me.
And Moria's response? And what do you know of the gradual development of the brain, beginning with the Silurian period, which was 444 to 420 million years ago? What does science know about the development of the brain beginning 444 million years ago?
Wow. So our science...
About this much.
Yeah, exactly, zero. Our science doesn't even recognize much life at all on the planet then.
I don't know what science recognized as anything intelligent 444 million years ago.
This is interesting that he's using the term Silurian, because that's a modern day pop culture name of a secret lizard people.
Oh,
seriously,
okay.
The Silurian. Yeah. Who knows?
Apparently, lizards were in existence in the Silurian period.
Interesting.
But let me just say that these terms were all the rage in the modern world, specifically in the United Kingdom in the 1880s. They were all agog about everything that was being discovered and analyzed by science in those days. So the Mahatmas were absolutely up to date on, not only up to date, but they had way more insight than any of the scientists did.
Question 20. Please discuss the origin of evil difficulty dealt with by means of the refined sugar simile.
Now, this is one of the questions that I almost think we disregard, but I don't want to totally disregard it because there are a couple of things that come out from this. Mm-hmm. So I don't know what their what they had been discussing about the question of evil, and specifically what it had to do with the refined sugar simile. So I had to do some research on this. And what I found out was that scientists in those days were associating the presence of worms in the digestive system with the amount of sugar that was being ingested by people.
Oh my gosh.
The more sugar people were eating, the more the prevalence of worms in their
oh my gosh.
in digestive tract.
Wow.
And so what that has to do with evil, I have no idea. But all he says is the more the sugar is refined, the greater the fermentation produced in the stomach, and the more worms you have. Go ahead.
It is useless to say that evil is as necessary to make good apparent as darkness is to make light cognizable. To the conditioned, it may be, to the omnipotent, nothing is necessary. But clearly, a conditioned agency is not the final cause. Above it is the law or principle that conditions it. That doesn't sound like Senator Hume writing that.
No, I don't know where they came up with that wording.
Okay.
But what I wanted to point out is that statement about evil as being necessary. And we will learn later on that evil absolutely is necessary. If there was no evil in the world, there would be no good. What would you compare? What would you call good? Everything would be good. It's like asking a fish, hey, what's the water like? And they're like, what's water? They don't know water.
Evil is necessary to learn and grow, that's for sure. If there was no evil, I mean, we might be fine, but there would be no progress or anything.
Right. So the concept is, without evil, there is no good. Without darkness, there is no light.
Yeah.
How would you know what light is if everything was light? You have to have contrast. And I think what they're pointing out is that it's only in manifestation when any of these things exist. And all are necessary. As much as we hate evil, it's absolutely necessary for our progress.
For growth. Yeah.
So,
how is this?
Moria says, how is this? Where? Not unless you create something outside the absolute and limitless.
Problems lying behind the veil that separates the non-manifested final cause from the manifested universe are beyond the grasp of minds conditioned in that universe.
No, they are not.
The absolute infinite is unthinkable, and we can neither comprehend it nor justify its ways to man.
Then why waste your time over it? Who commissioned you to do that? Your all-pervading supreme power exists, but it is exactly matter whose life is motion, will, and nerve power, electricity. Purusha can think only through Prakriti.
Right. If it's not manifested, it doesn't operate.
Exactly.
Okay. Interesting. Question 21. So apparently you are saying, and now either Sinnett or Hume is quoting something
They're
that was...
either quoting something or restating something that Moria has obviously said.
To make sure they understand. So apparently you are saying, quote, whether this be so or not, as regards the hypothesis of an absolute beyond the conditioned, It is and must ever remain a pure hypothesis. The highest intelligences in the universe know nothing of it. So far as they can explore, the manifested universe is boundless and infinite. Our philosophy admits only of what is known and knowable. This is admittedly unknowable even to planetaries. Wow. And it is based on the hypothesis non-existent. Why then consider it? And then another quote. Even if this concept were correct, how does it concern us? For thousands of years, the highest planetaries have explored the universe. They have found no limits to it, and nothing in it guided or governed by any external impulse. Everything, on the contrary, proceeding from internal impulses, which they understand and which suffice to explain everything they have ever had cognizance of. What good is it then to introduce this unnecessary concept of a something outside and beyond what for us is limitless and eternal, when, whether it exists or not, it plays no discoverable part in anything that concerns us? The fact is, your Western philosophical conceptions are monarchical, ours democratic. You are only able to think of the universe as governed by a king, while we know it to be a republic in which the aggregate indwelling intelligence rules. Wow.
And Moria says, well, we could say more, but never better. That is exactly what we would say.
So the two Englishmen have a good understanding
So,
of that.
yeah, they're actually grabbing onto some of this information, which is extremely complicated. But that last part,
Yeah.
the fact that your Western philosophical conceptions are monarchical, meaning
One king.
come down from above, one God, one king, somebody decreeing that something is thus and so. Ours are democratic because we have our Dhyan Chohans working together with Mahatmas and all the stages in between, who are working as a team. That's the democracy that he's talking about.
Question 22. Who are the artisans of the world?
The Dhyan Chohans, the planetary spirits.
Oh, the Dhyan Chohans are the planetary spirits. I think it's interesting that he said in the previous question that the Dhyan Chohans have explored the universe and can't find any edges or bounds, or it's
They
infinite.
can't.
Wow. My goodness. Question 23. The universe may primarily be conceived as space pervaded by an infinite and eternal and homogeneous mass of molecules in which motion, their latent, unconscious life, is inherent. So in this, its passive, unmanifested state, it may be regarded as chaos.
Yes. If only people were capable of conceiving what real chaos is, which they are not. And then there was a very long 2 or 3 pages of more information that I just completely cut out because we're already overwhelmed by what we've covered now, and it wasn't going to lead to any more clarity. So then Moria continues, the highest state of nirvana is the highest state of non-being. There comes a time when the whole of infinity sleeps, when all is re-immersed in the one eternal and uncreated sum of all, the sum of the latent unconscious potentiality, the pralaya. All that exists today will become, nothing will be lost. Don't kid yourself. Nothing is ever lost or forgotten. It just retreats into its potential state, waiting for the next period of manifestation. So how do we summarize all that in 20 words?
Cosmogenesis. How do we?
Cosmogenesis. So actually he hasn't gotten into anthropogenesis yet, but cosmogenesis alone is one of the volumes of the Secret Doctrine. If you really want to synthesize it in just a very short set of statements, this cycle that he introduced in a previous letter of coming into manifestation and experiencing through all of the different kingdoms, the mineral kingdom, plant kingdom, animal kingdom, human kingdom, superhuman kingdom, Dhyan Chohans, etc., comes back full circle into its original state, which was non-existence. One way HPB describes it is be-ness. It's the quality of possibly existing.
Beingness.
Beingness. They're concepts you can't put into words. The best we can do is kind of, what did the Buddha say? The finger pointing to the moon is not the moon. We can point, kind of describe in very vague, semi-intelligent ways these concepts, but you can only understand them when you are communicating with your higher self. And to bring that back down to a lower, to your actual physical brain, is simply not entirely possible. Obviously, the Mahatmas, when they're operating only in their physical brain, have a much better concept of what those things are than we do, you and me. Mm-hmm. But to fully comprehend it, they have to access their Mahatmaship. They have to operate as a Mahatma. And they do point this out. There are times they might be fixing their dinner, for example, or taking the trash out. They're just operating as a human being. But if they want to discuss anything meaningful on these topics, they have to access their higher mode of operation, which is as a Mahatma.
That gives us a clue on what our work might need to be, and that's getting the lower nature of our beings in check and understanding that we're so much more than that, but we don't always remember that because our needs and wants and likes and dislikes and dramas of our lower nature are so prevalent and active. That's the literal illusion that we're talking about, clouding our ability to go beyond and see the universe from our soul's perspective. And only from that perspective is where these concepts will become clear, and you have to do it through learning to meditate and calming the brain, calming the emotions, and going beyond. And then this whole the grand picture, the grand purpose becomes more clear. We come into manifestation in order to experience something physical. The molecules are always there, but then they interact when duality happens, whether the interaction is like earthquakes and tectonic plates, or the interaction is a peacock fanning its feathers and fighting off the other peacock, that's an interaction, or it's interviewing for a job and getting accepted, hired, or fired, those are interactions. And then once we learn and do all that for zillions of years, we're all gonna go take a big old nap called pralaya and then do it again.
Yeah, exactly.
There's the summary.
And it's good enough for me that periodically during meditation, I get a glimpse into these things, and it's quite exciting. I have to be careful though, because I found out that if you get too excited about something that is working, it stops working. So it's non-attachment. Mm-hmm. You have to not get excited about it, even though you want to be excited about it. That when those moments come, the moments of what does Eckhart Tolle call it?
Satori?
Yes. When one of those satoris come, it's quite exhilarating. Mm-hmm. But don't get too excited about it, because it will stop working. It will stop being exhilarating at some point, and then you have to go higher.
In the words of Patanjali, abhyasa vairagya tannirodha. A calm mind comes from practice, which is abhyasa, and then vairagya, don't be attached to it, because you're going to receive these cool insights, but don't be attached. Just keep doing your work. And practice doesn't necessarily mean your yoga or your breath work. It means your life. Do your life and don't be attached to the result. Just keep doing it. Keep doing your mission and don't be attached, and the results will come.
So, getting back to creating your dinner or taking the trash out, how do you make that a spiritual practice? And Eckhart Tolle tells us how.
You can be present. You can do it as a meditation.
Exactly. Whether you're washing dishes or cleaning your shoes or washing clothes, whatever you're doing, do it in a meditative state, in self-awareness, and enjoy doing it. If we think, oh, I hate doing this, you're probably not in the present. You're probably not making that a spiritual practice.
Probably.
So find joy in everything you do. Mm-hmm. It makes life so much easier. It really does.
It does.
Final words of wisdom?
Those were the final words. Those were.
Oh, that was it. Okay.
Oh, any more final? Oh no, we've find joy in what you do.
Find joy in what you do, and it really is. You can do this.
Yes, we can.
You absolutely can find joy in everything, and even the difficult things become easier to handle when you live the rest of your life in joy. Nothing is insurmountable. Nothing throws you, and that's the state of being that we are trying to accomplish. Once we do that, our progress will take off exponentially. That will wrap it up for today. So this is one of the more difficult ones, and if you made it this far, you get a gold star.
See you next time.